Now, on Enough Said, with KFAN Radio's Dan Barrero.
And I do think, by the way, in this case, this is an example where protests and the pressure that was put on
made a difference.
Absolutely had an impact.
Attorney and HoldingCourtPodcast.com's Ron Rosenbaum.
I believe they will come up with whatever the right decision, but somebody gets burned.
No doubt.
Either the cops get burned or Jamar Clark's family feels burned. How many times have we heard, we don't need any new gun laws. We just need to deal with the mentally ill, and that will solve the problem.
Enough Said.
Today I am nominating Chief Judge Merrick Brian Garland to join the Supreme Court.
Trust that justice will be done in our courts without prejudice or partisanship is what in a large part distinguishes this country from others.
This president will not fill this vacancy. The Senate will not confirm this nominee.
My name is Dan Barrero. He's Ron Rosenbaum, and the hall monitor in the control room is Lori Fisher. Let's get right to it. We talked about the possibility of the President of the United States attempting, at least, to box in the Republicans or make them look worse than they otherwise might on the basis of what kind of person or what kind of judge, at least on paper, he was going to nominate. I think he's done a great job, Ron, attempting to box them in because, according to the great legal minds I've read, this is not a controversial pick. This is not a far left, if you want to go down that route, pick. And it's, by the way, a man who I think is 63 years old, where the feeling is could have gone a lot younger and, lived forever, et cetera, et cetera. So I think he has very effectively done what I wanted him to do in this case, politically speaking, put them in a box. Will it have any impact on them actually budging? I think not. However, there is a little bit more movement than I think some people had predicted on the front end.
Yeah, well, I think he's made the smartest pick he could make of a guy who will never be on the Supreme Court. Let's be clear.
Does he know that, you think? You think Merrick Garland
Well, he said it was the greatest honor of his life, being a sacrificial lamb. Apparently hasn't had that many honors. But no, I think it's impossible that the Republicans are going to let this go. They know how important this is, Dan. This is the deciding vote of a 4-4 split on the Supreme Court for at least one and maybe two generations.
He's tough on crime, they tell me. Very tough on crime. The Republicans love that.
He's almost a warmed-over Republican, but he's not a Republican. And because he's not a Republican, and because he isn't to the right of Scalia, in my opinion, I agree with the Vegas odds maker.
It won't happen.
The odds of it happening are 0.
But I do think this is the maneuver that makes the Republicans look worse than if he'd gone controversial.
Considering, by the way, what they've been through. It's not easy to make the GOP look worse.
So what about the lame duck theory? Some Republicans have started to say, okay, look, if Hillary Clinton wins in the fall, then we'll be glad during that lame duck session to consider him, I should say. And, of course, that's the gamble here. That at that point, they'll figure that's the best we can do. They're not willing, however, to actually roll the dice.
Well, that's a great argument if the Democrats don't exist. But the Republicans' argument is the next president should have a say in this pick. The next president won't be Barack Obama. If it's a Democrat, it'll be Hillary Clinton. Do you think she's going to want to put a 63-year-old? No, she's not.
Probably so she'll 36 years old.
Or 26.
Okay, on that
she
note,
will withdraw that candidate, and that'll be that.
Okay, that'll be that. Let's move on. Enough said. The Jamar Clark case will not be sent to a grand jury. Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman saying that while the use of a grand jury has been standard in police-involved shootings in the state, it serves no purpose here. Let's take a listen to Freeman and Jamar Clark's father.
I concluded that the accountability and transparency's limitations of a grand jury are too high a hurdle to overcome.
And we don't want to be going around causing problems, burning up buildings, destroying things, because that's not right. We just want the truth.
Ron, you're shocked by this decision, saying it takes a lot of guts. Why no grand jury?
Well, you know me, nothing I hate worse than praising a politician, particularly one that I've ripped for years. But I got.
You think you got to him?
No, but more powerful people probably did. I give him credit. There's nothing in it for him by doing what he's doing, except when he either charges the cops
or doesn't.
I don't care. Half of the town is going to be angry, but it'll be his decision. There never was a reason to take these cases to the grand jury. Legally, it's not required, and these are the only cases, police-involved shootings, that go to the grand jury with any degree of regularity. I respect him for it, don't you?
This is what he's supposed to me. This is why you get paid. Well, I don't know if it's big bucks. You tell me. But this is why
you get paid big bucks. Well, he makes a salary.
He has this. This is his responsibility. This is what he's charged to do. These are tough calls. But you want him, presumably, to make the toughest calls, as you say. And I do think, by the way, in this case, this is an example where protests and the pressure that was put on
made a difference.
Absolutely had an impact. We can
agree.
argue about the propriety of how you go about protesting and where it's proper and where it isn't, but I think this is proof that it had a great impact. And the question is, though, is he only going to be vindicated if he comes up with a certain outcome? That's still my concern. Do we define justice as he's looked at everything and made a call, or is it going to be defined in this case as only that the cops end up charged in this case, no matter what the evidence might show? Well, the family deserves the truth. The cops deserve the truth, or as close to that as we can get.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, there's some very good attorneys in the county attorney's office who are going to look at this. I believe they will come up with whatever the right decision, but somebody gets burned.
No doubt.
Either the cops get burned or Jamar Clark's family feels burned. He can't win with half of the population.
Okay, we're going to have to stop it right there.
By the way, the best example of how courageous, look at what Backstrom immediately said in Dakota County. Go, I'm not doing that.
Okay, Ron. Let's move on to a hot mess. It's been 10 years since members of the Duke University lacrosse team hired strippers for a party and then were accused of rape. The 3 players arrested, later deemed innocent. It was a legal and media circus back in 2006. The media forced to backtrack. Lessons learned, Dan?
None. We have not learned a single lesson, sadly enough. Don't let anybody deceive you into thinking we have.
I agree.
You know why we know? 2 years ago, we had a situation at the University of Virginia involving a Rolling Stone magazine story that alleged an awful sexual assault at a fraternity. It was a one-source story. It was not checked out vetted by the reporter or by the Rolling Stone. And guess what the president of the university did on the basis of just that story? She, I believe, shut down the entire fraternity, sorority, Greek system, suspended it for a period of time. Gutlessly speaking, so what we've learned is nothing, that the mob, once it gets going, because the cause is righteous, and I think we'd all agree the cause is righteous, the details about a specific story, and in the case of Virginia, there wasn't even a corrupt prosecutor involved. It was just a Rolling Stone magazine story, and we went insane. Basically, it was guilty as charged. That story unraveled even more quickly than the story of Duke lacrosse 10 years ago.
But the lessons that should be learned is the public shouldn't jump to conclusions when the prosecutor says what his case is, because it turned out that not only did Nifong had a case, he'd never even interviewed the so-called victim, nor the perps. Hadn't even interviewed him, but nobody knew that. Then he falsified what he would say about the DNA, which didn't prove him not guilty, Dan. It proved him innocent, okay?
Big difference.
Even worse. What was the result of all this? The result of all this is that the prosecutor gets prosecuted criminally for what he did. Gets disbarred.
Correct.
Okay. The chief investigator commits suicide. That's how, and the press, who was every bit as involved in this as anybody else, had to publicly apologize. But I'm telling you, I totally agree with you. This could happen again
tomorrow
in a minute.
Yeah.
And we have seen it. I'm not going to name names of reporters here, but when I grew up, when I learned journalism, it was the first thing you be is skeptical.
I'll tell you this, though. I'm as bugged, maybe even more bugged in this case, by the, shall we say, academicians, the professors
they're the worst.
10 years ago who basically got involved. They were the mob. The same mob that at Virginia basically put enough pressure on the president, who didn't have the guts to say, we'll wait. We'll deal with this all in good time. And no one has held them accountable.
Well, they've never
well.
even apologized.
No.
They never even
acknowledged that they were off track.
Their attitude is, even if it didn't happen, it did happen. And, I mean, so as far as
Coming up on Enough Said.
Is it going to be 68 all over again?
No, it won't be like 68. 68 will be a cakewalk compared to...
Minor league ball?
Yeah, exactly. If the GOP...
There it is. Donald Trump.
In all his glory.
Last weekend, actually. Wish we could have talked about it last week. Let me start here. There's a reporter locally whose name will be nameless, who occasionally, or will not be named at least, who occasionally will say something very, very volatile or controversial, almost like throwing a verbal Molotov cocktail in the middle of the room. And then there's a reaction. He goes, "What? What'd I do? What happened?" So I want to start. I don't think this is all about Trump, but that's what comes to mind with Trump, is you play this game, this verbal game that he does when you're doing a TV show or when you're just a businessman. I think people are more willing to, they might not like it, but they'll laugh it off. But when you are running and leading the Republican side for President of the United States, they're going to notice. And so for him
So what you're saying is that's a big job he's running for.
It's a huge job, and he, at some point, even though his whole game is to be, I'm going to say what no one says I can say, it is going to have consequences, and he does invite, shall we say, a ramping up of tension that is, I think, that does embolden some of the crazier folks who are devoted to him.
Like, for example, when he says, if this protester causes a problem and doesn't leave peacefully, beat the hell out of him.
Correct.
Some people would say that's somewhat provocative, or if you do hurt him, I'll pay your legal expenses. Okay, but let me play devil's advocate on this. So, number one, this doesn't happen at other rallies. Okay,
we've seen people removed, but it's been quiet.
We haven't seen this kind of violence
like
at Cruz or Hillary or any of those things. So, Trump obviously has something to do with it, and I think he benefits from it. But in fairness, there are people who are trying to stop him at his rallies from speaking. What's their responsibility?
They have plenty. You're 100% right. And for people to be naive about that and pretend this is all organic is kind of disingenuous as well. It's part of a game, but I would say again to Trump, then don't play to it, because then you're opening the door more than you need to. Is there any point in saying you could go halfway, Donald Trump? Probably not, because he's not going to listen.
I don't think he's a halfway guy.
My concern is, well, what are we going to get, let's say, at the convention in Cleveland? I think that's what people are worried about. What's going to happen in the streets? Is it you were there in 68 in Chicago. Is it going to be 68 all over again?
No, it won't be like 68. 68 will be a cakewalk compared to...
Minor league ball?
Yeah, exactly. If the GOP tries to steal the election from Trump, these people will go completely nuts, because their
and they'll have a point.
Well, they'll have a point, and
they voted.
But their whole sort of reason for being is we've been done in.
Yeah.
We've been done in by the establishment. We've done in whatever. I think it's going to be a bloodbath.
It could be.
Let's move on to politics in baseball. Chicago White Sox players might not play in Wednesday's spring training game as a way to support Adam LaRoche's surprise retirement. He's walking away from a contract that would have paid him $13 million this season. It comes after a dispute with the team involving his teenage son's time in the clubhouse. Dan.
We got some good ones
I bet
this
you
week.
didn't anticipate this issue.
Well, here's how absurd this story has become about a kid who apparently lived with the team. I mean, to the point where he was considered the 26th man. And the team finally said, "We love you. We kind of grandfathered you in, but enough. At some point, you can't live with the team. It's our workplace. It's yours to a degree,
and they
but
never
it's our
badmouth
workplace."
the kid. They liked the kid.
They loved the kid, but they said that, there's, I think, a thing called Take Your Kid to Work Day. Yeah. But as somebody wisecracked, it's Take Your Kid to Work Day, not Take Your Kid to Work every day. My God. And here's how ridiculous this has become as a apparently polarizing, Lori said it, political issue, is that there are folks who are saying, who are so upset with the team that the other players they've created a shrine in the clubhouse with his uniform. Next thing, candlelight vigil. As somebody said, nobody died here.
This is like the Pope dying, for God's sake.
You explain this to me, why it has resonated with people that are suddenly think, oh, baseball, the White Sox, they don't like children? This has nothing to do with not the idea of encouraging a good relationship with your kids.
I don't understand.
It's absurd.
I don't understand the reaction. To me, Kenny Williams did absolutely the right thing. Sure, you can bring your kid, but not every single day. He can't live with the team. What other job would you even be able to make that argument in 1,000 years? And where these players are coming from tells me that this is more of the entitlement generation. Yeah, I want to bring my kids, and therefore I should.
You could play the cynic and say this particular player is coming off a bad season.
He is,
and maybe part of it. And the White Sox said, well, if we can find a way to get out of paying him $12.5, $13 million, let's do the back door. But regardless of that, there's no martyrdom necessary here. And
well, it's not like they asked him something unreasonable. They asked him something reasonable.
You know what the other players love about him? He apparently was a great gopher. He cleaned the spikes. So they basically got child labor in the locker room. They don't have to pay anything for to do all their dirty work.
I'm amazed people are angry about this.
Coming up on Enough Said.
Who could ever claim the Clintons are politicians?
I've said it before. I'll say it again. The old saying, they think we're stupid. But golly.
Welcome back to Enough Said. A Richfield man in court because he wants his guns back. Police took 74-year-old Ralph Gilbertson's guns away last year as a request made by the Hennepin Community Outreach for Psychiatric Emergencies. The case raises the question on how to balance mental illness with the right to bear arms. Ron.
Well, how many times have we heard, we don't need any new gun laws. We just need to deal with the mentally ill, and that will solve the problem. Well, this is a guy who, the reason it came to the authorities' attention, he was sending letters from his apartment complex that there were tons of CIA agents stalking him.
And some of them living, I believe, in that building.
Of course, or whatever, or inside of his brain. He believes in Bigfoot, he believes in UFOs. He's, I don't know if you had one. I had a crazy uncle who at Thanksgiving,
correct,
was always yelling about socialism or whatever. Didn't make any, Kennedy's.
Bernie Sanders? No, that's a different time to time.
No, he was never that coherent.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's a former security guard. He's a Marine reservist. He's a strong
nothing on his
Christian.
record.
He's never been.
It's clean, right?
No, he did no criminal record whatsoever. And he says, I'm 74. I need my guns for my protection, which is a reasonable argument. Cops come in. They're in an impossible position. They're told that there's a mentally ill guy, basically, and they take his guns, and he's challenging it. Well, I hate to hurt their feelings. He's going to win because under the it's Personal Protection Act, they call it Conceal and Carry Act. Under that, you can only take the guns if somebody has been formally admitted to a mental institution or has been adjudicated. This is a civil commitment. Even more rarely does this happen, that you're a danger to yourself or to others. He doesn't meet any of that criteria. So what do we do with a guy like this who the cops deem to be dangerous? They take his guns and they can't.
This is I'm glad you brought up this example, because this is a great example of how after bad things happen involving guns, everybody's on TV yelling, how did we miss the signs? How are we not paying attention? And what this story reminds us is...
This guy's holding a sign!
Well, that's true, except that it doesn't necessarily mean he's capable of taking the next step. And my point is, it shows how difficult, in many cases, it actually is to make a call.
But
a lot tougher than we like to think after the fact.
But how simple it is to say it's never about guns. we've just got to crack down on the mentally ill. Well, here's a guy that basically the cops believe is dangerously, I'm not going to say mentally ill, but maybe mentally ill, something that they view.
Is he the crazy uncle or is he crazy? I think that's what one of the cops said. And I thought they made another really good point.
By the way, what would you rather be, the crazy uncle or the crazy?
I think you'd rather be the crazy uncle because I think the crazy uncle maybe allegedly is just going to be all talk. But cops are in this position, as was pointed out in the story, that they almost have to be amateur psychologists here. They have to try to anticipate. And so it's difficult for me to blame them that they took the step they did. But as you say, based on what the laws and what we know now, I'm not sure that they're going to be able to keep the guns away.
We have to leave it there, Dan.
You can't leave the decision to the cops. There has to be a more formal definition.
Because it's time for the lightning round. First up, who will Hillary Clinton choose for VP? Paul Begala, one of her advisors, says her decision won't be on political benefit. He says, in part, quote, she will want someone who can advise her, someone whose judgment, temperament, and experience she values. Ron.
Well, if you believe that, I will send you. We'll sell you a bridge in Brooklyn. What do you say to she's not a politician? She's a statesman. Who could ever claim the Clintons are politicians?
I've said it before, I'll say it again. The old saying, they think we're stupid. Begala thinks we're stupid. He's been in this forever, and I'm with you 100%. Give me a break. Why would anybody believe him at this late date?
Okay, next up.
Well, we have Donald Trump as a candidate. That may be one reason.
Next up, looks like the future Viking Stadium will remain located on Chicago Avenue after a big debate over whether the road name should be changed to Vikings Way. Dan.
Well, the Vikings are bitter.
Don't laugh. This is a serious issue.
The Vikings are bitter about this, apparently, according to a news conference this morning, but they're going to move on with the rest of their lives because, after all, they didn't get much from us, did they?
$500 million is nothing.
And all kinds
Plus,
of other
what they're
benefits.
going to get from Egan could make that look like peanuts.
The silliness about Chicago Avenue to me is I don't care if they rename it, but they, at the start of it, pretended it was about we can't have a Chicago Avenue. That's where the Bears play. It's just such a silly argument, and so to me, they kind of ask.
Every time I hear the argument, I take a Vicodin.
We're back into the madness of March Madness. It seems though everyone is consumed with their brackets. Are you, Ron?
How many brackets have you done? Don't answer. I don't really care.
Understand. What is it about this particular tournament that causes people who wouldn't know a basketball from a volleyball and don't? By the way, they're the one who win.
I don't know why everybody cares because I don't even fill out brackets anymore. I'm so bored with it. And part of it, I think, is because I don't want to be tempted like everybody else is to do, hey, did you see how I did in the third round? I'm a genius.
Okay, we got to get to the next one. Let's stick with college basketball. You also now have a new postseason tournament called the Vegas 16.
Thank God.
Dan.
Thank God. Well,
we needed, don't be cynical, we needed another postseason tournament.
Think about this. The kids
everybody's a winner.
Need to feel better about themselves. And it wasn't enough that they had the NIT, beyond the big dance, the NIT, the collegeinsider.com, the CBI. We got the Vegas 16. And you know what happened? They couldn't even find 16 teams. The first year of the Vegas 16 is actually the Vegas 8.
You realize it only used to be 16 teams in the NCAA and the NIT.
That was
okay, real quick.
Now every kid's a winner.
Real quick, SeaWorld will no longer breed killer whales in captivity. They'll start phasing out the orca shows. Ron.
Well, they caught enough crap
this been keeping
for enough years.
Up. I know.
Well, I care about animals, Dan.
I care about some animals.
You don't care
I'm selfish about it.
You don't care about these animals.
What are they doing bad to the whales, keeping them in captivity at all?
Is that the deal? In a small area, no bigger than this.
Right. Let them out. I agree with you. Let them out.
They're not going to let them out. They can't, because if they let them out, they'd be killed. So now we've got 28 more years of these. I don't know, there's 20, 30.
So what's the big deal?
I don't really understand.